Hey, welcome back. I've got another video where we're going to be talking about yet another Old World Almanac. I did not expect to be doing two this week, but here we are. And it's a pretty, crazy one in my mind. Basically, I really was of the opinion that last week had, been sort of the stealth faction preview for Bretonia. Once you sort of factored in everything else we've learned about Bretonia throughout the articles, sprinkled in here and there. And yet here we are with an actual full on faction focus on Bretonia. And it's sort of like, I'm surprised there's even more for them to tell us, but at the same time, this is actually what I was expecting the faction focuses to be, getting into who they are. Because I've said this many times, it's not just about picking an army based on how they do on the tabletop or even just how they look to you, because everyone will always say, buy what you think is cool. You also have to find the army itself just cool in general. So this is um, this is a really good start for anybody who's interested in learning about who the Bretonnians are. So let's get right into it. So Kingdom of Bretonia is a key player in Warhammer The Old World. We know that because the two box sets are Bretonia and Tomb Kings, and they're actually going to be a core part of the beginning lore because basically Bretonia and Tomb Kings, or at least a faction of Bretonia, they're going to have a little war over something, probably something that was stolen, most likely. So there's a video. I'm not going to play it due to copyright musics and whatnot, but come check this out. It's on YouTube or on the Warhammer community site. It basically gives you a really nice mix of some art and some new models and an explanation of who Bretonia is. Probably more efficient than what I'm going to do, but something to look at. And Bretonnian history. Um, so they tell us right off the bat who the Bretonnians are in history. They are the descendants of the Bretonnian tribes who colonized this region of the Old World, which had originally been abandoned by the High Elves when the elves who became the High Elves when they gave up their colonies and went back to Ulthuan. Um, and they have like 14 dukedoms made up of basically a representation of the companions of Gilles Le Breton and himself, and they sort of like are based around the mythology of his 12 great battles, where they went around and just sort of like took care of all the orcs and the beastmen and all the monsters and evil doers of the land that were always preying on them. Um, so this was the first time the Knights of Bretonia sort of formed, and we also get our first Grail Knights. This is covered in my Bretonian faction focus I'm doing. It is still coming. Um, I'll actually just let you guys know. Basically, we had a death in the family that we had to take care of, and um, you know, as a result, I spent a lot of time with my wife and didn't get after this. So there was that, and we're kind of back on track now. It just sort of took us by surprise because it. So yeah, it's a really cool bit of lore. If you like Arthurian legend, Bretonia has some really cool lore to get into, and if you just like the idea of like medieval cavalry charges, again, really cool lore. So yeah, Gilles and a couple of his buddies, they're the first ones who become Grail Knights. Eventually, he picks up more buddies. They become Grail Knights, as I recall, and they form the Chivalric Code and the Dukedoms, and they carried on all that to this day in the Warhammer world. They give us the Code Chivalric, so to serve the Lady of the Lake, to defend the land and those who dwell upon it, to protect the weak from the wicked, to always oppose the enemies of virtue and order, to never give up the fight, your foes of unvanquished, to never break faith with a friend or ally, to always display honor and courtesy. So basically, these are the points of the code that all knights must adhere to. So, Lady of the Lake, that's like the goddess of their religion. She's like the embodiment of the spirituality of Bretonia itself. And when they talk about defending the land and those that dwell upon it, that's the peasants. Even though they don't treat them well, in their head it's a good deal because the peasants couldn't really defend themselves without the knights. and the knights take all the risk in defending them, or so they think. Obviously, they press their peasants into combat as well, so sort of you know, the Bretonnians aren't like clean, squeaky heroes like the bright colors suggest. They're sort of their own form of bad guys in many ways. I've seen people try to deny that or argue that, but I really think it's hard to disagree that the way they treat their peasants doesn't make them the good guys. Anyways, again, protect the weak from the wicked, same thing. Always oppose the enemies of virtue and order just means anybody that they view as evil has to be fought. Never give up a fight, meaning don't run away. This actually in the rules will cost you your blessing of the lady and your ward save, so don't run away from battle. Never break faith with a friend or ally, meaning just basically don't be an oath breaker, and be trustworthy and loyal. And always display honor and courtesy. This is just do all the things that bring you and your family and your land honor, and be you know polite essentially. I think they're referring to ladies when they say courtesy. It's just basically to be good to the women of the nobility, I think is what they're talking about there. Anyways, they also tell us about Athel Loren and the Wood Elves. So basically, on the eastern flank, they say here of Bretonia, there's a giant forest, forest of Lorraine, and inside that is this giant, impossibly deep woodland that is filled with all kinds of monsters and everything, but also the wood elves, who are like the descendant of elves, who the descendants of elves who didn't like run away back to Ulthuan when everything fell apart. They just went into the woods and said, "Well, we're going to stay here. We're just going to live in the woods in harmony with nature." There's Orion, who's like a god of the woods, and there's a tree man, and they fly around with giant hawks, and there's you can see a tree here eating, swallowing a beastman. There's probably dryads in there somewhere. Wood elves are a whole different army, but they're actually really, you know, deeply tied to Bretonia. Even though they're not like, steadfast allies, they will work together, except, the elves will also work against the Bretonnians. They really just work to protect themselves. When it benefits them, they work with Bretonia. Basically, um, it's just a scary forest, and you don't go into the forest because there's monsters, but also there's wood elves who might, kill you or do worse things to you just because they don't always like humans. We also learn about the Green Knight. For those who don't know who the Green Knight is, he's this mysterious figure who will basically ride out of the mist or ride out of the trees, out of the lakes, and attack the enemies of Bretonia in the direst moments of that land. And he's also this mysterious figure in their lore, in their religion, because if you are a knight of the realm who gets a vision from the lady to go seek her and drink from the cup, you go on to the quest. So they become questing knights. And eventually they're going to get to the end of their quest. And there's a good chance they're going to fight this guy, sort of to prove their worth as knights, to step forward into the next stage and become Grail Knights. And if they can basically best him in combat without being, really injured or killed, then they get to become Grail Knights, drink from the cup and all that. But otherwise, he might kill them. And yeah, there's a whole bunch of lore about who he is. You can look it up if you want to have spoilers from the end times. We find out who he is. It's one of those things where, like, kind of a lot of people sort of like, kind of, we had suspicions of who he was, what he was. I think just a lot of people didn't like that the mystery was taken away. But that's a big part of the whole end times. A lot of mystery was taken, a lot of character was taken, and that's a whole different discussion. But if you're interested in who he is, but don't want spoilers, just skip any wiki sections or like videos that talk about the end times. And yeah, he's actually a special character too, by the way. He will come out of like the woods in the rules, or at least that's how he used to work. And he could like run into the woods and pop out of a different section of woods or a lake or something. He was really unique and really fun, and I'm hoping we get to see him back in the army list. I think he's going to be in that. the arcane journal for Bretonia. And yeah, moving on to present day. As we know now, it's 2276 by imperial calendar. I forget what that is in Bretonnian calendar. It's probably like 500 or more years prior because they weren't established as quickly as the Imperials were. And it's just this big land of cities and villages, the 14 dukedoms. They're all well defended. Basically, things are going pretty good for Bretonia right now. There's no major threats internally or externally, and they just sort of, live their lives dealing with threats as they pop up, but there's nothing pressing at this moment in their history. Things are coming, but we're not there yet. Their king, Luen, the Orc Slayer, he's a Grail Knight, as I recall, because he's also been alive for like 100 years by now, something like that. And he has basically led internal crusades to go around and like wipe out the orcs and the beastmen and whatnot to the point where it was going to take them generations to sort of get back to any real threatening number. And so they're in this kind of little golden age, is sort of how I'm reading it. But Cetra the Imperishable, the king of kings of the Tomb Kings, he's mad and he's attacking the border princes, and specifically he's attacking this like realm of Sir Cecil Gaston, the Worm Slayer. He's got his own little border fortress down in there. Seems like he's not exiled. They're calling this a chivalrous realm, like an outpost of Bretonia. My guess is that basically he was given some task to protect a certain vital area with his little fortress, and now they're under attack. He probably stole something when he was down in like Arabia. I think this is after the Arabian Crusade, and I do recall, if that's when this is, the Bretonnians stole a bunch of stuff from Kemri on their way by and on their way out, and the Tomb Kings went after them and a bunch of other people for stealing their stuff. And they do that all the time. That's like their thing. Them and the Lizardmen will just sit quietly in their little corner of the world, really content, and then somebody steals some gold, and like the two of them just they just figure out where that person is and they go after them. Um, and yeah, anyways, Cetra's coming, and the Duke of Brionne is like one of the southern dukedoms, and his buddy is about to be attacked by a bunch of skeletons. So the Duke of Brionne takes his armies off to go and like save the day. Knights in shining armor. It's very lore appropriate. This imagery here is super cool. I love this. Um, Brionne is the black and red faction we've been seeing, and that's why they've been focused on one color only. For the story's purpose, it is really just going to be Brionne um, forming the bulk of this army. Although I don't believe there's any reason we can't play mixed heraldry like we have in the past. I think it's just that for the lore purpose, which is, I'm going to say, is very common in Bretonnian lore, a lot of the combat is going to be just focused around troops from one dukedom. Anyways, that's where this article ends. I'm going to end the video here because it's getting long enough, and I'm looking forward to seeing if tomorrow we get a Tomb King um, video. Although by the time I post this, it'll be like today, sort of like basically. Are we going to get a Tomb King article following the Bretonnian article? I'm going to be shocked if we do, but at the same time, we've already gotten 2 articles this week, and it could be this whole thing, which I'll talk about in a further video, just to sort of explain my thought process. And I'm only going to put that video out if we get another article the day after this one. So, anyways, if you have any thoughts or comments, leave them down below, as always. And thank you for watching. Have a great day.